Hello. Do you have friends? Of course you do. But would you trust any of them to remind you who you truly are? Are you authentic enough of a person that someone you know could accurately describe who you are on the inside? Not everyone can answer this question, and that is a serious problem. As humans, we don't build our identity all on our own. Who we are depends on how people reflect us, our social mirrors. They illuminate for us through conversation, what we value, and how we affect the world, and, in a grander sense, who we truly are. But if we were to lose that reflection, our sense of self becomes unstable. That's when dehumanizing environments can shape us for the worst. And what I aim to prove today is this. When meaningful emotional bonds are absent, dehumanizing environments gradually dismantle a person's moral identity and weaken their connection to humanity itself. Now, what do I mean by this? Well, individuals who lack meaning emotional bonds with those around them will often face many challenges. Without these bonds, some might start seeing others as less than human, while others see people only as competition or even as nothing at all. In some cases, some might even see themselves above all others, or see themselves as nobody and lesser than everyone surrounding them. I believe this is because, during isolation, people start defining themselves not by personal beliefs or values, but rather by fear, survival, or obedience to a greater purpose. These people have no feedback loops, meaning they will lack a sense of accountability or even basic empathy, fracturing their sense of self. Through this feature presentation, we will cover 3 main ideas that prove this concept, starting with emotional bonds. Now, to understand how emotional bonds shape identity, let's have a look at Cormac McCarthy's The Road. This novel follows a man and his son traveling along a desolate, post-apocalyptic path as they scavenge for resources and try and make it towards the coast. In this world, humanity and empathy have essentially vanished, with the only sliver of hope being our father-son duo. The father's purpose and identity are built on protecting the boy. Without his sole meaningful connection, he would lose his morality and his reason for living. While the boy is the moral compass of the story, he often reminds the father to stay compassionate and gives him reasons to keep going. Their bond acts as a shield against the extremely dehumanizing environment they've found themselves in. Most others have already resorted to extremely cruel means of survival, including robbery, cannibalism, and slavery. They often refer to this act called carrying the fire as a symbol of hope for preserving what remains of old world values such as empathy, compassion, and humanity. Spoilers for The Road, but as the boy holds his dying father in his arms, they converse. Is this real? The fire? Where is it? I don't know where it is. You said you would never leave me. This quotation shows just how deeply the boy's identity is connected to his father. The flame isn't only a metaphor for innate goodness, it's the identity his father gave to him. When he loses his father, he's scared of losing that part of himself that knows how to be good in a world so cruel. In this way, The Road shows that identity and humanity are not built in isolation, but through connection. Their relationship is what's keeping them human. They are carrying the fire, showing directly how emotional bonds can shape identity and preserve your sense of self. Now, that's all well and good. Relationships? Awesome. But what were to happen if these bonds were missing? Let's talk about the absence of connection. Osamu Dazai's No Longer Human serves to greatly contrast The Road. While The Road features an external collapse of the world, with two people coming together to preserve their humanity. No Longer Human places our main character, Yozo, into a regular world with an average social environment. Unlike the father and son on the road, Yozo cannot form meaningful emotional bonds with anyone around him. Without these conditions, he struggles to build a stable identity. Instead, he survives by performing, adopting masks, personas, and exaggerating behaviors to hide from the fact that he feels fundamentally disconnected from humanity. His entire sense of self becomes fragmented because no one reflects anything real back to him. He eventually even has trouble looking at himself in the mirror, going as far as to say, "I've lived in terror of my own face." He no longer knows who he is. He has no identity because he has no connections, and he has performed as this caricature of himself all his life. And now, he lives not knowing who he truly is. Yozo is our perfect example of what someone with no social mirrors looks like. With no one to affirm his identity, teach him his empathy, or relate to him, he finds himself alienated in a world just like ours. His identity doesn't just weaken, it dissolves, and he becomes no one. The internal dehumanization of Yozo in No Longer Human is a perfect parallel to The Road. As we can see that whether the world is falling apart or perfectly ordinary, disconnection from what makes us human can happen regardless. I mean, by the end, you could say he was no longer human. Anyway, Garth Ennis's The Boys recently finished up and will serve to drive my point home, as this show demonstrates both sides of the argument at once. In the series, identity is shaped, twisted, or rebuilt entirely through the presence or absence of emotional connection. The show gives us two extremes: characters who lose their humanity because they never had any meaningful bonds, and characters who regain humanity because they formed new ones. Starting with the latter, Homelander, who perfectly embodies what happens when emotional bonds are absent, and how they can affect someone in a position of power. John Gilman himself was raised in a lab, deprived of affection and treated more like an experiment than a person. From this, Homelander never develops accountability or empathy, and with no social mirrors, he builds an identity based entirely around ego, power, and fear, fundamentally making him inhuman. Even past his initial upbringing, nobody can compare to his level of power. So, in combination with the neglect he faced as a boy, nobody can relate to him, as he now considers everybody lesser. Now, for a contrasting take, Huey Campbell. Even in the face of cruelty around him, surrounded by the Boys, a group that often resorts to violence, manipulation, and morally questionable tactics, Huey still tries his best to stay moral. He constantly questions whether what they're doing is right and pushes back when their actions cross the line. This isn't because he's naive. It's because his identity is shaped by emotional bonds that he carries with him. His emotional connections with his father, or more notably, Starlight later on, give him these social mirrors, reflecting that accountability and empathy, even when everything around him is telling him to give in to the violence. Huey's humanity survives because he has people who anchor him, people who remind him of who he is and who he wants to be. This makes Huey the perfect contrast to Homelander, where Homelander's identity collapses inward due to a total lack of emotional bonds. Huey's identity is preserved through them. Huey shows that emotional connection doesn't make someone weak, it makes them human. So, after looking at The Road, No Longer Human, and The Boys, we're left with one final question, the same one we began with. Because at the end of the day, that question isn't hypothetical. It's the foundation of identity, Across all three stories, we see the same truth reflected back at us. Emotional bonds are what make us human. They shape who we are, they preserve our morality, and they anchor us when the world or our mind begins to fall apart. In The Road, the father and son survive because they have each other. Their bond becomes their identity. They carry the fire because they can carry one another. In No Longer Human, Yozo collapses because he has no one, no mirrors, no connection, no one to remind him of who he is. Without these emotional bonds, his identity dissolves, and he can't even look at his own face. Finally, in The Boys, we see both extremes at once. Homelander becomes monstrous because he grew up without love, without empathy, without any social mirrors to reflect his humanity back to him. Meanwhile, characters like Huey hold on to their identity precisely because they have these emotional bonds, fragile, yet imperfect and real. These stories all answer the same question in different ways. Without emotional connection, we lose ourselves. With it, we become human. So, I implore you to ask yourself again, if you forgot everything, your name, your past, your values, who would you trust to remind you of who you are? Whoever came to mind at that moment, that's your fire. That's your humanity, and that's your identity. And that is the power of emotional bond.
I am a plumber who's probably gonna plumb again. Mamma mia, I cannot understand why ghosts just won't leave me alone. Luigi's Mansion 5, Luigi's Mansion 5. You can get the fourth one, we don't need it anyway. I've got my poltergeist and flashlight and I'm here to save the day. I said Luigi's Mansion 5, Luigi's Mansion 5, Luigi's Mansion 5, Luigi's Mansion 5. Stuck inside of the shelves and you can find coins and even get rich.